Man, I got to tell you, that last couple of weeks have been just crazy. You've been running around gallivanting,
Yeah.
um, and I've just been, dealing with a lot of stuff on the home front. But I got to tell you, these last couple of weeks have been just nuts. But it's great to get back together and start talking 80th anniversary topics. And we're glad
Absolutely.
everybody's here to be with us. Uh, so. Episode 3. Welcome to the We're Not Lost Private Podcast. I'm Joe Muccia. That's Leighton Hughes. And we've got a bunch of stuff on tap to talk about today. And I think, but we can't climb into that just yet because I'm got to tell you, the last two episodes of Masses the Air, wow,
Mm,
just a
phenomenal.
like a emotional roller coaster. A lot of gut punches in there. What'd you think? I mean, with five in particular, and then we can talk about six quickly.
Oh God, yeah, five. Wow. Not to, I, I have to admit, Nate Mann or Rosie, he is possibly my favorite character in the show, and I think don't don't shoot me for this or some of the Austin Butler fans. I think it's better with him without Austin Butler in it. Maybe it's just because he's too much of a big player. But don't get me wrong, I love Austin Butler, love his character. But for me, I think Rosie Rosenthal and Nate Mann, phenomenal. Wow.
Yeah, we'll spoiler alert this. So if you don't want to hear about it, you haven't seen it, then just mute it for a little bit. But I mean, yeah, but the emotional roller coaster, especially at six afterwards,
Mm,
like you have the juxtaposition of Cros's experiences in Oxford, and then they're intercutting it with Egan's escape and evasion,
mm,
and then the emotional high of him seeing Clevin.
yeah,
And you got to love the delivery too. John Egan, you're 2 o'clock.
I know.
You know what I mean? I mean, just fantastic work. Kudos to John Orloff and the crew and everybody who was involved with it. Just they've just been doing such a great job, and I'm just sad that we only got about 3 episodes left to
Three
go.
episodes, and
But
one of those
it's
is going
been
to be a.
fantastic.
It has, and I believe one of those episodes is going to be about Tuskegee as well.
Yeah,
I believe because that's sort of a crossover point. Whether they get follow-ups, but you're right. It's. I mean, wow. I got forget the mission, but obviously episode five with Rosie, just what an incredible
Munster.
pilot. Munster, yeah, and I think they've built up to that as well. They've added depth because the way he handles that, that B-17 in the air. I feel like in a previous episode when he's talking about, his experiences, he's got like, 1,200, I think they mentioned about 1,200 hours of flying, so he knows that how to fly that bird. And I
Yeah,
think
he's
that
literally
sort of,
jockeying it like a fighter pilot, the way you watch him. And it was
mm,
interesting because John Orloff had posted something on Facebook. Somebody was asking him about Rosie's maneuvers in that. And he's like, no, actually, if you go back, we have Rosie's inputs. And he was talking about how he was maneuvering the plane. And I just thought they handled that really, uh, it was very deftly handled
yeah,
and showing it. And I love at the end how he says, I'm going to put them on your doorstep. And really, if you're a bomber and the way he starts to angle it upwards, that's not a good way to be. You're giving them the full length and width of your aircraft to shoot at. But what he's really doing is they were coming up from underneath the aircraft. And as he angles it upwards, he lines up his tail gunner for those
mm.
shots. It's really well done.
That's phenomenal,
Outstanding work.
brilliant. I think that's probably the best episode of Masters of the Air so far. And like I said, I love Rosie and his crew. I think they're phenomenal. His co-pilot, who's played by Josh Bolt, who plays Pappy Lewis. He's in Catch 22. So he's got a little bit of World War II experience. And I really like him. I really like him in Catch 22 in episode one. And so, yeah, it's, I mean, what two productions to be involved with Catch 22 and Masters of the Air, but still, yeah. Um, you know, just Rose, I mean, after episode six, what comes next, next on Masters of the Air, and you see again, it's all about Rosie again, and I've been told it's Berlin, which again, having looked at that a little while ago, it's not going to be a good mission, but
No,
phenomenal. It's
and
utterly phenomenal.
and obviously, Rosie, I was talking with, I actually watched the episode with my parents, and I was telling them about some of Rosie's background and how he manages to make through 52 missions, and then he's
Mm,
part of the legal team at Nuremberg. If anybody hasn't done any research on Rosie Rosenthal, please do. He's a phenomenal I would say character, but I don't mean character in the miniseries. I mean he's a
No,
character. I mean he is um, just a magnificent pilot, and
person overall, he
yeah,
is
his overall
wow.
qualities as a human being. I mean, they just like you said, Nate Mann's just a beautiful job with it. I thought they did a
Mm,
great job in picking their story anchors through this. You have Clevin, Egan, Crosby, Rosenthal. I mean, they just
yeah,
all these guys, they're perfect choices. And again,
yeah.
I know there's been some nitpicky criticism about some of this stuff, but to me, I look at the breadth and width of the spectacle,
Hmm.
and just a fantastic job. The casting was excellent as well.
Yeah.
So
Lo-
anyway,
A lot of British
sorry for
actors.
all the spoilers. You can unmute us now if you don't want to hear the spoilers. And then we're going to talk about some of the 80th anniversary stuff. We're slightly maybe a week to 10 days off on the things that we picked to talk about, but I think they're pretty relevant items. I don't want them to get lost in the sauce, so to speak, as we do the run up to Normandy. Um, and so I know we owe our viewers and listeners some easy company content, and we'll talk about that as we do our our wind down at the end of the episode. What's coming up in the next few episodes, at least what you and I have spitballed.
Hmm.
But I think we can't talk about 80th anniversary events without looking at something like Monte Cassino. Um, for those of you out there who don't have a strong history or a strong knowledge of the particular actions concerning Monte Cassino, off the bat, I will say Matt Parker's Monte Cassino book and also Peter Caddick Adams has written a Monte Cassino book. Both are excellent. Matt wrote his about 20 years ago, and he interviewed over 500 participants in the battle. So it's really, you get a lot of firsthand accounts of what happened. And it's very much a multinational fight. But in this case, on the 15th of February, we're looking at Monte Cassino, not for the ground actions, but because it got to such a stalemate that the Allied leadership decides to conduct a massive bombing strike against the Abbey, um, which intelligence was very poor. We'll do the setup with that. Is intelligence is very poor. They don't know if or how many Germans are manning the Abbey. And what we find eventually later is it's hardly any, and mostly it's refugees. So when the bombing occurs, and it was 254, a mix of 254 B-17s, B-25s, and B-26s that come in two waves. And there's a lot of footage out there of the bombing. You can look it up on YouTube. Um, as they come in and they plaster the Abbey. They don't take down the majority of the walls, but what they do is they create a way. There's so much damage to it. It creates more fighting positions for the Germans when the
Yep.
Germans do decide to go back in and man the Abbey, and they make the fighting for the Abbey itself much worse. But I my mind just clicks over to
Hmm.
the footage I've seen, both from ground-based footage that was shot and then aerial footage that was shot from observation planes above the bombing echelons. And it obviously decried. This is one of the most revered locations in all of Christendom, and it's when you watch it happen on those videos, it's just terrible. And then it just creates more of a problem because not only have they not killed Germans,
Hmm.
they've created a better fighting position
Yep.
for the Germans. So just again,
Well,
I highly recommend Matt Parker and Peter Caddick Adams' books for those of you who want to read more about it. But you were going to say, um,
what
like,
you just said then, with the bombing, rather than kill the enemy, they're creating fighting positions. I mean, that sort of, I remember hearing something about this with Normandy. They bombed the beaches so they could have fighting positions, so they got, cover of going towards beaches. But so it's interesting to hear this. Obviously, with rubble, my God alive, yeah, it's probably enhanced that position a little, probably better protection as well if you think about it.
yeah,
Um,
and you think about the criticism of the bomber force, the UK's bomber command, and the U.S. Army Air Forces, how they're criticized for using precision in how they describe what they do, and it's kind of an oxymoron because most of the time they're imprecise, but in this case they're very precise. It's a
Hmm.
daylight bombing raid, um, and they really do hit the target. So again, that happened on the 15th of February 1944, so we're just past the 80th anniversary of that. There'll be a tie-in to that later in the show as we work through some of our on this day hits. With that, do we want to talk about Nathan Gordon? I mean, because man, when I read this also occurred on the 15th of February in 1944, but it's a Pacific Theater. Lieutenant Nathan Gordon, flying a Catalina out of Patrol Squadron 34, and they were nicknamed the Black Cats because their aircraft were painted black. They mostly did night interdiction against Japanese shipping, but in this case, um, Gordon and his crew, they're on a patrol. They're flying out of Samurai uh, in towards the New Ireland area, um, and they are vectored in by distress calls. There were series of bombing raids against New Ireland undertaken by the U.S. Army Air Forces, and a
Hmm.
number of the crews get knocked down, and they land in the waters off of New Ireland, some of them as close to 500 and 600 yards from Japanese positions.
Oh,
And
wow.
Gordon makes a series of 4 water landings. And each time he makes a landing, he thinks he's got everybody. And unlike
Launcher.
taking off the ground, there's less resistance, right? Because just wheels on tarmac until you lift off. You're fighting the ocean as you take off. And in a number of these rescues, he's like zero wind to take off in, which, and for our listeners who don't understand how the wind works, you want the wind blowing at your aircraft because it allows you to build lift as it hits your wings and ailerons. So he's got no wind. He's fighting resistance from the ocean to take off, and each time he lands, he picks up more men, which increases the weight in his aircraft. By the time he's done his 4th water landing, he has 15 officers, enlisted men, air
Wow.
crewmen that he's rescued. And he's later decorated with the Medal of Honor for this. And for those of you who want to learn more about it, you can go onto the U.S. Library of Congress website and look up Nathan Gordon. He actually was interviewed. There's a great videography of it, and a video program of it, and they've got the transcript as well. And there's a number of resources out there if you want to read up more about Gordon. But that's an amazing piece of flying when you think about.
Incredible.
And the Catalina is not it's a very ungainly looking aircraft, right? It's not sleek like a
No.
P-51. I mean, this thing is like a flying boat, literally. And for him to do that like 4 times, and he's
So for
just
that aircraft, so the Catalina, is that more of a reconnaissance aircraft as well?
yeah, it's more of a reconnaissance, and then can be used for uh, you know, light bombing. Like if
Hmm.
you're going to go after shipping, you could use it for light bombing, but it's mostly an observation aircraft and a
Yeah.
reconnaissance aircraft. If you've ever seen one, you've seen pictures of them. I mean, there's observation bubbles built into the aircraft. So when you go and look at it in the gunner's positions, they're glass houses. Think of like the nose on a B-17, similar to that, turrets, etc. But it's got a boat-shaped hull and it's made to land on water. Um, but it is uh, despite the fact that a highly capable aircraft to do the water landings, when you think about the fact that he's done 4 times, no wind, fighting the ocean. Oh, and by the way, you're 500 to 600 yards away from Japanese position, and
Yeah.
they're trying to blast you out of the water while it's all happening.
That was going to be my question. Was he under fire while doing
Every
this?
time he went in the water to pick up men, he was taken under fire by the Japanese defenders at New Ireland.
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing. There's a great somebody actually did some artwork depicting the rescue, and it's pretty great. It's a great looking piece of artwork as well. And again, you can go listen to Nathan talk about his uh, the rescue in detail, and he talks about the aircraft overload. He talks about fighting the ocean conditions, trying to get the aircraft in the air. He talks about receiving the distress calls and having to go back in after he thought he's cleared the area and having to come back down around. And the funny thing is, he's fairly non-hesitant the way he describes it. Like, okay, yeah, we just circled back around and went back down and got vectored in, and we made another water landing. As a matter of fact, like he was going to the office, you know, for another day, just another Tuesday or whatever day it
Unbelievable.
was. But again, 80 years ago today, well, not today, 80 years ago, 10 days ago,
About 10 days ago, yeah.
pretty amazing. All these things are happening. And again, we definitely wanted to talk about, that's why we pitched, well, when we were talking about what we wanted to discuss on the show was Normandy is looming large, right, for the 80th, and then you've got Market Garden and Bastogne and all that. And we want to make sure we're going to spend a lot of time on that, but we wanted to talk about Italy and maybe the Pacific Theater a little bit. So I thought that was just a great point
Great
to
story. Yeah, it's
stop on,
phenomenal.
right? And again, we'll have a bunch of links and additional stuff posted on the Patreon site, and will be attached to the posting about this pod. So for episode 3, so you'll be able to go take a look at those things if you want to on your own. And I think next we got to talk about the big elephant in the room when it comes to Italy, right? Anzio. Um, so Anzio, I'm sure folks know about it, at least in passing. Again, in an attempt to break through the Gustav line or unhinge the Gustav line, um, Allied leadership in the Mediterranean decided they were going to conduct a landing at Anzio, which is about 60 kilometers south of Rome, but north of the Gustav line. The thought process was they were going to go in, they were going to put enough pressure to the rear of the German lines. It was going to cause them to have to pull forces away from the Gustav line, which would open it up for US and UK forces to start making major penetrations into the line there and then up the Lari Valley, which is basically your major line of communication leading up on the western side of the Italian peninsula. What they were fighting some forces in terms of logistics and force structure that they weren't going to be able to overcome, and this is going to affect the way the battle is undertaken. And again, Normandy looming, right? Rome is captured
Hmm.
the day before or 2 days before Overlord begins. I mean, they are really up against it in terms of how much shipping's available,
Hmm.
because as you know, like they need all that shipping, for Normandy, and some of it's going to get stripped away. And not to mention, they just don't have the force structure to do a huge landing that will really put the kind of pressure on the German line that they need to exert to have them pull back in force. The initial landings go on, like I said, on the 22nd of January. Um, the first UK infantry divisions put ashore, along with the 3rd Infantry Division, the US 3rd Infantry Division. And then later on, they land the 45th Infantry Division, the Thunderbirds, and elements of the 1st Armored Division. And then there's a smattering of other forces, the
Yeah.
504th Parachute Infantry. I believe a battalion or two goes in. Three battalions of U.S. Rangers. You have some tank units, independent tank units, and then some British Commando elements go ashore as well. And they form this kind of a jagged crescent perimeter around Anzio, and they really make good gains those first day or two. And by the time the Germans kind of counterattack, this is 6th Corps, by the way, is commanded by John Lucas. He's in charge of the landing force. General Mark Clark is commanding the 5th Army, so it's his show overall. But Lucas is the commander of the landing force, and he served on Patton's staff in North Africa, and they thought they were going to hand it over to somebody who's a cool hand who's going to be able to manage this situation, but with enough aggressiveness because under Patton's tutelage, they've figured, oh, this guy's going to be a tiger.
Hmm.
And it doesn't go that way because Lucas is a very cautious commander, and he knows, one, he's tied to shipping because of his lines of communication. That's where his supplies come in, and he doesn't have a huge force structure. So they kind of make their advances, and they do fairly well. But then the Germans counterattack, and there's a bit of a stalemate that develops. And you have the UK 1st Infantry Division in the northern part of the perimeter, and you have the 3rd Infantry Division, the U.S. 3rd Infantry, in the center of the perimeter, and the 45th U.S. Infantry Division in the southern portion of the perimeter, that crescent. And the Rangers push out to Cisterna. They're trying to capture these road hubs, these little towns, these road hubs, and the first and third Ranger Battalion basically get wiped out by the German counterattack that goes on there. And this is a terrible loss for them, for Rangers. And I have a lot of buddies who are Rangers, and it's a kind of a sore spot that they were kind of left out there hanging. They didn't have enough anti-tank. They didn't have any tank forces with them, and they're counterattacked by strong German armored forces, and they're pummeled. I think out of 670 something Rangers that are in the perimeter, only 6 or 7 individual Rangers make it back into
Wow.
the lines. So they're completely wiped out. And a lot of these are paraded in Rome. A lot of these Rangers are paraded in Rome in front of German war camera. And you can see the footage. It's out there. Um, but the lines sort of stabilize because Lucas doesn't have the forces to punch through the German defenses, and the Gustav line hasn't been unhinged. So it fails to do both of its objectives, really. And on the 16th and 19th of February, the Germans counterattack, and it's a fairly desperate fight. I mean, they penetrate 1 mile in to the U.S. lines and 2 miles across. And really, the only reason they're stopped is because naval gunfire, air cover, and they take a bunch of anti-aircraft units with 90 millimeter cannons and convert them into anti-tank guns and move them forward. And it really stops the Germans in their tracks. But at that point, that's really when the stalemate really, develops.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they won't be able to. They finally are able to unhinge the Gustav line, and the Germans have to fall back. And for the Germans, the losses they take are terrible. They're never going to, I think they lose 6,000 or almost 7,000 men over the course of the fighting from January through February. And these are losses the Germans can't really afford. They don't
Hmm.
have forces to pull
Yeah.
from everywhere else, right? They can't pull them
No.
off the Eastern Front, and they can't pull them off the Western Front because they need them to hold the beaches because they know there's a invasion coming at some point. But all this takes place 80 years ago and a week
Yeah.
ago. Um, and
I mean,
there's a lot of great resources with Anzio out there for reading.
of course. Yeah. I mean, it's
Go
certainly
ahead.
what I've got to jump into. But obviously, you talk about Lucas. He was relieved of his command, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
About a
Lucian
month.
Trescott takes over for him. A great
So my,
fighting general, by the way.
which is what I was going to say. He joined up in 1917, so sort of not quite. Obviously, yes, World War One, but probably didn't go across and fight. But a 30-year career. But he was instrumental in developing the American Commando Unit, i.e., the Rangers. So, I mean, yeah, this
Oh
guy
yeah, yeah, big
knows his
proponent of the
stuff.
Rangers. Not only that, he was already had a great reputation when he was in North Africa, when with the Third Infantry Division, and he just cements it there. Like he's seen as a comer. Like he's an old cavalryman, um, and he's a dynamite commander. And like you said, when Lucas is finally relieved, there really is only one choice, and it's going to be Truscat. And
Mhm.
he's an outstanding commander, but even he can't um, turn the tide with what he's got. Like those same limitations that hindered Lucas
Mhm.
hindered Truscott. He can as well, but
Yeah.
and we won't get into all the Mark Clark stuff out there. Um, I read a lot of accounts from soldiers that served in the Fifth Army that absolutely hated him. I know James Holland's a big fan of Mark Clark. He's doing a lot of work with him with his books that and so he's got a bit of a soft spot. He thinks he's been kind of done dirty by history over the years, but he's also just kind of an unlikable figure too.
Right. Okay.
He
I'll have to
doesn't do
check out
himself
interviews on
any
him.
favors. Yeah, he
Yeah.
doesn't. And Lucas is kind of this sad figure. And what was the Churchill quote about we thought we were unleashing a wildcat into the hills of Italy. Instead we like got a whale floundering on the beaches or something like that.
Oh no, I
I
haven't
know,
seen
I
that
know.
one.
I'm just paraphrasing it. I think,
But yeah, I know what you mean though.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
he had to know once the line stabilized and he couldn't break through the German defenses, it, he was going to get relieved at some point. He was just too cautious, and he was perceived to be too old and too
mhm.
frail, and and sometimes perceptions are do more damage to you than your actual battlefield performance. And
Yeah.
but he was, he wasn't wrong. Lucas. He didn't have the logistical tail, and he didn't have the troops available to do what needed to be done. In his defense, when you think about it, if he would have advanced as aggressively as he could have and basically outpaced his supply lines and his rat lines where his troops would come in, the Germans could have snuck in behind him and then closed off the beach and then destroyed his forces piecemeal. So, I mean, in his defense, there's not much more he could have done with what he
Yeah.
had, because there were no more forces coming in behind him. It wasn't like he was going to gain this ground and then there was going to be another wave that was going to come in
Yeah,
and
of course.
reinforce him.
Hmm.
So,
I mean, that brings me on to my question here, where you talk about, another wave following behind. So my understanding would be um, that they are being diverted to be used in Normandy, for that. So with that in mind, I mean, I don't know if you know the answer. Maybe it's just sort of something, to chat about, but surely, because I know when the battle finished, it was like the 5th of June, and obviously, D-Day was, well, it was due to start on the 5th of June, but obviously it was delayed, postponed by 24 hours due to weather. So I ended up going on the 6th. But would it not have not made sense to have delayed Overlord? I would say not by a month, but certainly by a couple of months. But then you're going into, I suppose, you're going into if you delayed it by a couple of months. I'm answering my own question here, um, in one
yeah.
sense. But the fighting season is the summer season. It's the summer. It's that's what it is. That's what it certainly was in Afghanistan. So I suppose to have as much of that weather as possible is,
Well, I think when you look at Overlord, weather and tides become a big part of
mm,
your planning consideration, and they knew the way the tides were working. It was going to be, if they put it off, it would be a whole nother month, and they were worried about the
hmm
German reinforcement of positions in Normandy. Some of the positions that were only half finished or partially completed would have been completed in
hmm
full, and that would have made the landings that much harder. Plus, you also have the landings in southern France to consider as well. So there's an operational timetable
hmm
in terms of the landings, but you also, the third point of consideration, I would say, is the Russians are putting tremendous pressure on the Allied command to land in France to take pressure off of them, because they
hmm
know if the Allies land in force, the Germans are going to have to divert forces to Western Europe into France to counter those attacks, which may take pressure off them. And it was supposed to be synchronized with the Russian spring offensive. So there's a lot of considerations there. And I don't think Clark and General Alexander, the British commander, the overall commander who took over for Eisenhower, if my memory is not too faulty, I think they knew they were never going to be the primary effort at that point. I
hmm
think, and Clark was so vain and vainglorious in how he chased publicity for his army, because he knew their time was waning in terms of being the point of main effort. And I think that he wanted to make sure that the Fifth Army didn't get forgotten. That's why he, this is, people will debate this, whether he disobeyed Alexander's orders or he fulfilled them and then kind of did his own thing in terms of seizing Rome, because he wanted Fifth Army to have that glory before Overlord launches,
Yeah, of
and
course.
they're regulated to the dustbin of history, or however you want to look at it, which they're not. Obviously, we're talking about it 80 years on.
Yeah,
We're still talking about it. So I
of
would
course.
say there's a lot of considerations there, but I think the key consideration for them was the shipping was going to get taken away at some point and funneled to another area, and that there were no more forces that were going to be coming to Italy.
Yeah.
Like they were
That
not getting any more
makes.
divisions, right?
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was that
yeah.
was what they would get replacements, but they would not
But
get any more divisions. So individual
yeah,
replacements for units. But
yeah. I was going
so
to say replacements at an individual level rather than a unit
yeah,
level or a
they would get
division.
replacements. They would have the normal a normal pipeline for replacements. They were not
Yeah,
getting any more fighting divisions, and I
interesting.
think they knew that. And really, they needed to take Italy for
Hmm
two reasons, right? They got to knock Italy out of the war. They
hmm
take away one of Hitler's allies. They knock Italy out the war. They force the Germans to to leave forces in Italy, which keeps them from moving them to another area. And then obviously the capture of airfields of what is it, Foggia,
Hmm.
where they base a lot of aircraft that end up not only part of the air campaign in Italy, but are part of the broader campaign to attack Romanian oil fields and attack Germany itself. So I mean, there's good reason. I don't think like an American planners at the time were they were focused on landing in France before we went into Sicily and Italy. And then I think hindsight provided them the proper wisdom
Hmm.
in looking at the Italian battlefield. And I feel bad when I had talked to Italian veterans, allied veterans of the
Hmm. Hmm.
Italian campaign,
Yeah, of
how they
course.
all thought they're very much forgotten front, because they really did provide a tremendous gain
Yeah.
in what they were doing. Again, seizing those airfields, knocking the Italians out of the war, and and tying down German forces that would otherwise be deployed to other places. Um, I thought they did a fantastic job under terrible
Yeah.
um, climactic and terrain conditions. The winter there was particularly harsh in 43. Um, and again, there's a lot of resources out there for our listeners and viewers who want to check it out. We'll post some links. The Green Book histories the U.S. Army put together after the campaigns are excellent. Um, but there's also lots of other resources out there. And again, we'll be hanging those when we hang the pod, which should drop today. I think.
Yeah, look, I'll get it done today. Yeah, certainly the Spotify will be out there.
And
Um, and obviously audio, YouTube, depending.
yeah,
Because obviously we're having some issues there.
yeah, and we
Um,
apologize up front. YouTube has not been friendly to us right now. We've just been having upload issues. We're going to try a few other things for our Patreon subscribers. Leighton, you've hung your Bastogne trip report that we did, the video
that's
trip
yeah,
report. Okay.
that's now on Patreon. That's still available. That's sorry, that is on our Patreon page for you to watch that. So obviously, where myself and Joe talk about Bastogne, where I was recently, and we talk about a couple of areas, i.e., the 326. I forget the name of the town, the area where the 101st assembled before going into Bastogne. I was Deschamps. Oh God, Joe, help me out here.
Oh, you mean where the 506 came up out of Bastogne? That was Luzeri, just
Yeah,
south of Foix, Noville, on the N30. Yeah, you've shot some beautiful drone footage there for our paid subscribers. You'll be able to check that out. And you're going to be working on another trip report here, right? At some point. I mean, you and I will probably we'll
yeah, absolutely. So
we'll
I
work
had,
on that.
the opportunity, where I was working recently, and it's certainly one I'm interested in learning a little bit more. Is obviously the 305th Bomb Group, Chelveston. You know, uh, Again, a few years ago, gosh, more than a few years ago, purchased a book. And just it felt, I say felt like something different because there's some cracking historians on the 305th on Facebook, who got a lot of knowledge, but certainly knowing that it's accessible to go to and go and see it is certainly something I want to read into a little bit more. So I've been able to get my drone up around that. I was hoping to do some again on Wednesday just gone, but the weather was so bad. I think I tried sending you a video of me going through this quagmire because there was some World War II buildings, the workshops for the three, for the on the 305th technical site. And the weather was it was horrendous. I couldn't get my drone up in terms of walking to some of these places. It was just too bad. So I'm hoping, certainly, yes, we'll do that with what I've got, and I could sort of point out a few areas. But it was certainly one thing I was able to find out from my friend who I met up on. I went up again. So yeah, I went up on one day where the weather was perfect. It was fantastic in terms of getting the drone up. Um, and then I went again 2 days later, and the weather it just changed overnight. Absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, I went bonkers
So
from what I could tell.
I was nuts, and there's a few locations, the communal areas of what I want to get my drone over. So certainly one of the squadron communal areas, you can still see the footpath there. There's a building. I'm not sure if it's World War II. It certainly looks like from some of the photos I've seen. But then also as well, there's another area which is again, um, excuse my term, but certainly administration offices where the Red Cross girls were stationed or based at 305 or the 305th of Chelveston. But the Wrighton 69, the Wrighton 69th, sorry, were based or did some training there. And I'd read that somewhere before, and again, the friend I was with had confirmed that. But as sort of when I wanted to try and revisit that information online, um, it was kind of Bovington, Bovington Airfield of where they did their training. But I'm sure that I'd read that William Wyler had done some training at Chelveston with the Wrighton 69th, as well as Walter Cronkite, I believe. But certainly, I know that he's done training with the 69th, but whether that was at Chelveston is another story. I probably need to do a little bit more research on that one. But William Wyler had done training at Chelveston. So I wanted to get my drone up over the site. Again, it's an industrial area, so whether I could drive down to it or not, I didn't want to sort of get told off, but certainly fly the drone over to see what I could see, and again, just sort of with the map that I've have, just being able to sort of piece things together as well. Because there are still, I was told there's still some infrastructure there. Again, probably just been reused. But yeah, it was really interesting, and I hope to go back again, um, and meet up with a landowner. We've conversed, and again, when I went this week, he was away, so again, got told, when I'm back, let me know, and hopefully he'll be able to show me some, a little bit more.
I
Some
think that'll be great. I think our listeners and
fantastic.
viewers will get a real kick out of that, especially obviously not the same as Masters of the Air, but with Masters of
Mm,
the Air and the popularity of talking about U.S. Army Air Forces in England. I think it'll be a great trip report. We'll do some research. We'll get some period photos and hopefully match
yeah.
them up with some of the stuff that you've shot with your drone. And I think you were talking about you were gonna head to Thorpe Abbotts at some point, or you were gonna try to. Is that still on the books or no?
That's still on the books. I mean, yeah, I'm hoping to go when it's open so I can actually go in the museum as well. I
Yeah,
did
they're supposed to be
again
opening soon, aren't they? I
the
thought I
next
saw a
couple of
post.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, next I think, or the first weekend of March, but I think I'm going to be there third weekend or nearby, sorry, in March. So I'm hoping I can again get away and pop down and meet a friend, but also as well, go to Thorpe, and have a look at the museum. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. But on that as well. This week again, hoping to get my drone up. It was straight after Chelveston, so I drove half an hour to go to Polbrook. So Polbrook with the 351st flew from, as well as that escapes me. There's another bomb group that flew from, as well as the RAF. The infrastructure, or what you can, what remains of that infrastructure still there is phenomenal. Obviously it's permission. You need permission. It's private land to get access onto it. But obviously, that's where Clark Gable flew from. That's where Clark Gable was based. And I'm devastated that this is why I want to go back as well. There's a fantastic video of RAF Polbrook. That's what I found on, it was called on YouTube, and there's sort of a hustle and bustle at the main gate. And in the distance, in the background, you can see, the J hangar. And that is, from what I believe, it is straight down the main drag of the entrance. And I just wish I'd seen this video before I went, and being able to sort of do a then and now type thing, because you can see that road, and I'm sure there's some buildings on the right you can just make out, and they're still there. But there's certainly some air raid shelters on the right hand side as you're going down, certainly on the left hand side as well. And it was just a snapshot in time, looking back in time, um, and then fast forward 80 years, you're there and you can see it. It's when you're walking around, and I remember I was looking at an old, aerial photograph of the site, and it's unbelievable. I mean, you can see the foundation, you can see the outlines of these buildings, of the pathways. It's phenomenal. And again, sadly, the weather was pretty bad because it'd been, God bless British weather. Um, Obviously made the ground absolutely horrendous to walk on, and but it was still pretty phenomenal to walk around and see some of these places. You could see the remains of a chimney and of a pathway. And I remember just, looking online later that evening when I got to my hotel, of just some of the pathways that I walked on, and the communal sites. I probably need to reach out to this. Is again, this is on private land, and looking on the website, they got some pretty harsh, legal warnings if you are caught wandering. But again, it'd be interesting to know if there's anything that remain. I've been told that there is some communal buildings again. So again, where Clark Gable lived, as well
That'll be
as the
fantastic.
remains.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so it's
think
being able to go.
everybody will get a kick
Yeah.
out of that. Yeah,
So fingers
that's
crossed, be able to go back, and I'll have to go through this. The landowners. I'll have to speak to the landowners and be able to, yeah, see if that's access is possible, because they get, there's two or three communal sites, and it's the Rothschild family. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if
yeah.
they'll allow access. Really
Yeah.
interesting.
So if you're around, don't go over there thinking you're just gonna walk on the grounds. Please be
No,
careful. Make sure respect people's property. Um, because I've seen that go south in Normandy a few times with different folks going on private land and um yeah, not working out too well. But
no, and I think it's including with drones as well. I mean, certainly when I rang up for the main technical site, I obviously did a little bit of research beforehand, and what was in the area, and again, it was basically told, had a lovely conversation with one of the landowners, and he just gave me a set time of when to turn up, and because they do like retreats, lodging there, so just between a certain time, that's when they deem that there's not going to be many people around. So if I wanted to put my drone up, it was a little bit more respectful as well. So that is obviously I was very cautious, about. So again, I want to go back, ensure it's between a certain time, but also let them know as well, well, first of all, ask permission and see if I can see anything, see if there's anything from an aerial view that you can look down and pick up on stuff. Because certainly on the ground level, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
well, that'll be great.
Mm,
The Bastogne trip report's hung. That one we're going to work on and then get it up at some point. And for March, we were talking about obviously we want to give our listeners and viewers some Easy Company content. So I think our next show is going to be Easy Company in England before D-Day launch. So we'll have quite a bit to talk about, some of the training exercises, a bunch of different things before they board the plane for the $10,000 flight or jump in that case. And we're also thinking about doing a show with the topic will be Curtis LeMay. We'll probably have some smaller topics in there, but at the primary,
yeah,
you wanted to do something on LeMay, obviously a huge figure in U.S. Air Force history and his impact on the bomber fleets at the time, and um, so that'll be a real interesting show as we talk about him and some of the things that he um, helped to develop for the U.S. Army Air Forces at the time. I'll be traveling down to Toccoa at the end of March for the Currahee to Normandy event run by the All Airborne Battalion. This is going to be a jump jump training for the Band of Brothers, some of the Band of Brothers actors, and they're going to run Currahee. They're going to get put through their paces by the jump team, and then they're going to do their qualifying jumps so that they can jump in Normandy. So that'll be pretty cool. I'll be on site with some interviews of the actors, and I'll be doing some historical hits supporting the the event. So that'll be fun. I'll do some walkabouts of the camp. They're continuing to build buildings on the original campsite in the regimental area
that'd
portion
be
of the camp.
phenomenal.
We'll do some footage from the top of Toccoa, I mean, top of Currahee Mountain, and we'll basically have a great time. We'll put a video trip report together, and
That'd be amazing, Joe. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, we'll get that
I know.
we'll get that for everybody. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see which guys turn up. I mean, and obviously, there's a list building on their website, and I think certainly most of them I believe, are going. So yeah, it'd be really cool to see that and hear that.
Yeah,
As
it'll
well
be
as
fun.
yeah, certainly the footage from Tacoma as well will be absolutely brilliant.
Watching them run up Currahee will be fun too. Hope the boys are working out and getting their legs
Yeah,
stretched out for that because yeah, it'll be good. They're
that'd be
not going to
great.
be there like the original guys were starting in August and September of 42, where you still got that late summer, early fall heat. And I have run Currahee during that time frame. That is not a fun experience. But when you get to the top, you do feel like you earned it. The view is pretty fantastic up there. Again, for our Patreon paid subscribers, I've hung some things on there relevant to our episode 2. So some more stuff from Everett Blakely's son Jim, a piece he wrote about his dad and his dad's crew, uh, and a picture of the crew, and there's some other stuff on there. Um, for all of our subscribers, I posted a few things as well, including Buck Cleven's recounting of the Bremen mission, and then his bailout and attempted escape and evasion. It's pretty funny to read his actual comments about what happened with him. If you don't know, you'll enjoy it. I highly recommend you check it out. We'll hang some stuff on our Facebook page as well, and we'll put some stuff up on Insta.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to be unloading a Twitter account, X account as well, just so we hit all the social media accounts, so we can spread the news about the We're Not Lost private podcast as far and wide as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll try and do some, then now, if I can, my footage from Chelveston. I know I put one up recently on our YouTube, so please check that out. I'm hoping to do a little bit more of that as well as time goes on. Just so you can see. I mean, they're very popular on YouTube at the moment as well, aren't they, Joe? With people doing that, and they are really fun as well. So
yeah,
I'll try and
when we finally get to our shows in the December timeframe, I'll start hanging some of my now and thens from my trip to Belgium and Germany. Some of them are pretty good if I do say so myself.
yeah.
But we've got lots of stuff coming. We've been talking to authors and historians, cast and crew from Band of Brothers and Masters of the Air. We're going to look forward to probably having cast and crew from the Pacific on as well at some point. So keep following along. We appreciate all of you. Anything
Yeah.
anyone you want to add, Leighton?
No, no, just keep on supporting us. I mean, what you're doing is, we're not rolling in the money like Scrooge McDuck. It's keeping the lights on at the moment. So, I mean, as things develop and myself and Joe start finding our feet with this, we'll look at, like we were literally just discussing before the pod, weren't we, about stickers, t-shirts, things like that as part of
Yeah,
a Patreon's reward as well. So obviously we'll start to tier that up as well. Like I says, we just want to sort of lay the foundations, and then yeah, we'll start looking
yeah.
into that then, and so yeah.
So thanks everybody. Thanks for stopping by, and that's a wrap on episode
Thank you.
3. Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.